Quality food service starts with the best ingredients, passion, hard work, the right specialist, and a solid plan. But a plan is not enough. What about your policy, your mission, or creating a vision? Who is capable of helping you with the best hospitality decisions? A specialist. But a specialist on its own can't know everything, can't be everywhere, can't know all specs, can't have all the time, can't give you all the support you need, can't be all over the world, can't guarantee the best quality, and can't make the best decisions. But our FCSI consultants, together with our network, our knowledge, our connections and our system, they know everything. Our management and design consultants are everywhere. They know all the specs and all the newest innovations. They have all the time. They can give you the support you need. Together, they have all the experiences they need to help you make the best decisions. Together, we know the industry. Together, we can be all over the world and give strong independent advice to fulfill your solid plan and secure your future. FCSI is about products, projects, but most of all, about people. Together we share, we support, we inspire. FCSI.
So welcome everybody, it's an EAME talk today. And we are finally talking about sustainability and life cycle of kitchen equipment, catering equipment in English, I think. Kitchen, we call it professional kitchen equipment or catering equipment. And we have two star guests here today. That's Laura Hunter. Laura's from a company called Impact Loop and FCSI member in UK, if I'm right.
Yes.
So now we have Sascha Deisel, HKI. So he will tell us something secrets from Brussels. So that's so far away from us, so that we need him to enlighten us about what's coming up, what's coming next. And then we will see if there are similarities between UK and EU, right? We start with Lauren and then Sascha. And then I think we have 15 minutes or 10 minutes left for questions if they're coming, right? So then I would say we start with Lauren. So Lauren.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Lauren. I'm Commercial Director of Impact Loop. I'm also Chairwoman of the FCSI TM65 for catering equipment. I joined the commercial catering equipment industry when I was 21. I'm now 35, and I've worked kind of across supply chain from selling equipment to specifying equipment and also with manufacturers and servicing. But in my full-time job, I am a kind of a sustainability catering equipment nerd and work within the UK and other regions to gather carbon data and build sustainable procurement programs.
Great. That's impressive for 15 years and 30, and you started early.
Yeah, 21 years old. I went from selling houses to selling catering equipment, which is quite a step change. But the UK industry is it served me well. I've got a really good group of friends in the industry and supporters. I'm very privileged to have worked with a lot of really high-end manufacturers. So I'm really excited to be here this morning and have the opportunity to speak to you all.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start.
Cool. So I will keep this really high level and really light touch because Sascha is going to talk about the really complicated things. As I've mentioned, we specialize in carbon measurement of catering equipment. Oh, why isn't it moving? There we go. So commercial catering equipment has a really high impact from manufacturer all the way through its life on the environment. The industry is pretty behind in terms of other industries and where they are with carbon data and sustainability. But I'm pleased to say over the past 2 years, it's really started to embrace sustainability and how it moves forward. I had the honour a year ago of doing the first white paper on the impact of commercial catering equipment point of install. And we have quite a significant data gap across the supply chain of what equipment looks like. There's been a very big focus on energy efficiency over the past 10 years. In the past 3 to 5 years, food waste and what that supply chain looks like agriculturally. And we've seen in the past 18 months a big step change into commercial catering equipment and what that looks like. So from my white paper that I worked with the likes of Overbury on a Cat A, Cat B office fit out, a small kitchen, so around 20 to 30 metres squared, has about 158 tonnes of embodied carbon. And that's before it's turned on, before it's used, before there's any food in it. From the moment it actually arrives at the building, we're looking at 158 tonnes. I like to kind of take the science away and put it into analogies that people will understand. So that's 12,500 fully grown mature trees living for 1 year to offset the emissions of one small 20 to 30 metre square kitchen. For a large kitchen, the jump isn't as significant as you'd think, but obviously the intensity of the equipment grows outwards. We're looking at about 217 tonnes of material impact only. The data gap a year ago and now was pretty significant. So the material impact numbers were the most reliable, and that's what we worked with. So we're looking at many, many forests across many, many different planets and many, many different lifetimes for us to try and offset the impact of our industry before it is even switched on or a piece of gnocchi or pizza is cooked in it. The real carbon footprint is much, much higher, and we are aware of that. However, we are getting to a point now where data is becoming more mature and more available. So how do we know how sustainable equipment actually is? It's based on product carbon footprints, PCFs, EPDs, and it relies on data from manufacturers across the supply chain. It'll tell you the carbon that's gone into making it, the carbon that goes into using it, disposing of it, and how it travels. The data sets are pretty much the same across every industry, and they use many calculations using the GHG protocol, the ICE protocols, and there are many different versions of it. Mainly, the most reliable is a materials-based carbon footprint, which is what Impact Loop specialises in, and what a lot of the kind of large buyers of equipment, the constructors, the designers and consultants are now looking for. Previously, it was a cost calculation, but now it's about materials. So to keep it really high level, it looks at what's it made from and where were those materials from. To give everybody a broad and sweeping idea, Chinese steel tends to be nickel pig iron, European steel, German mainly, which I'm sure nobody is surprised by, tends to be highly recycled from the likes of Utukumpu or ThyssenKrupp. The recycled content, is it a raw material or is it sustainably mixed? How does it get to the manufacturer? How does it get to the client? The energy that it uses over its lifetime based on a use case. So gas, water, electricity, and that also includes waste. What is the life cycle of the equipment? I've found over the past 2 years of producing carbon footprints and working with manufacturers and consultants that the magic number is 7 for this industry. 7 years pops up 9 times out of 10. I go into a mild state of shock when I see 5 or 12. But again, there is a big data gap in the industry of how long does equipment actually last. So the PCF looks at the policies of the manufacturers, responsible sourcing, end of life policies. Will they take it back? Are they circular? Is there any eco design? And other certifications such as Kiwa or Green Tag Health, Green Tag Rate. The calculation standard that seems to be moving the quickest at the moment is the FCSI TM65, which I am the UK chairwoman of. Now, there are other addendums, the LA, which is the rest of the world, the NZAUS, which is Australasia, and the North American addendum. However, it does seem to be moving the quickest in the UK, and I'm sure there's many manufacturers who have joined the call and have received an email from me wondering what on earth I'm asking for and why it's important. So, the TM65, it's the first step on the journey. It's not an EPD and it's not an LCA, but it measures the things that we've just spoken about on a materials-based composition. So it looks at the embodied carbon of a piece of equipment, which is not the operational carbon. They are 2 peas in the same pod, to use an analogy. The embodied carbon is the manufacturing, repair emissions, the end of life of the physical piece of equipment, whereas the operational carbon is its energy usage, water usage, and its waste elements. So I've just listed out as a little bit of a repetition what this looks like and what it measures, but it is a very in-depth piece of data collection. I think there's 40 to 50 data points in there. The main one being the material extraction and processing. It will ask for the percentages of the equipment, of the materials in relation to the net weight of the equipment. And it has a very extensive list. I think there's even cement in there. Now, I hope we're sat on a call where there are no manufacturers using cement. And if there are, I will speak to you about it later. However, it also will ask for the locations of where those materials are coming from. There is a section about the energy consumption of the factory that it's made at. And that will create, using several different very complex calculations, an actual emissions factor and a calculation per single piece of equipment from that product family. The transportation, which is calculating on where the materials are coming from to the point of manufacture. Construction and installation, how does that get to the customer? Maintenance and repair, which is something that's taking quite a long time to adjust. At the moment, it's sat at a 9.09% buffer of the equipment over its lifespan would be replaced. But it does ask for the materials that the common replaceable parts are asking for and their frequency and the end of life. Can it be recycled? Are they recyclable materials? So by that, it will look at steels as being recyclable and fiberglasses and insulations as non-recyclable. All of this pulls together into two different levels, which I'll touch on fairly soon, but it gives manufacturers a first step onto the data collection for pieces of equipment. Manufacturers, I think, as we all know, really do market the sustainable credentials of their equipment. We see day in, day out that there's a lot about energy efficiency. However, in terms of sustainability, that's not a breaking news subject. That's been around for 10 years now, with varying different degrees of Energy Star or MEPS or Keyword, whatever the standard is that people are using. Manufacturers will talk about the sustainable functions of their equipment and add bells and whistles, fancy concepts and functions that make it more sustainable, such as AI-driven data cooking, weighing the food source, that goes in there, connected cooking. But does that really mean that the equipment is sustainable? The best example that I have here is the more technology that you put into your equipment, the more PCB boards, the more motherboards, the more wiring that it needs. And a PCB board has between a 300 to 700% higher emissions factor than a standard electronic component. So yes, a piece of equipment may have AI screens, it may be able to listen to your voice, it may be able to tell you what you've put in the fryer, what you've put in the oven, what the waste output is. But does that mean that the equipment is actually more sustainable for having all of that technology? So the TM65 outputs two different levels, and I must thank MKN for firstly leading the market in green steels and the way that they produce equipment, how efficient the factory is. Peter Helm has done an incredible job when it comes to actually human efficiency and manufacturing efficiency. They granted the permission today to actually use their data. And on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, this data that's on display actually uses the exact same data set. The TM65 Basic only looks at phases A1 to A3, which is cradle to gate, and doesn't use as many emissions levels and factors to actually work out the calculation and doesn't account for more whole life carbon. So on the left side, we've used an electric range 4-zone hob by MKN, and the A1 to A3 emissions factor, due to a basic data set that isn't highly developed, comes out at 6,400 roughly kilos of carbon, 6.4 tons. By working with independent calculators, drawing I think they've had 3 or 4 of their actual team at Wolf and Buttle work on this from their ERP system, exporting from SAP and putting some real heavy duty work into developing accessible data for consultants and end users. They've now reached the mid-level TM65 output. Now, the mid-level is an awful lot of data, not just about the product, but about manufacturing processes, repair rates, locations, and supply chain. But as you'll see, and I will share this presentation at the end if you would like me to, the outcome of the data, even accounting for repairs over the life cycle, the data actually comes out much lower because it's a highly developed data set. So the TM65 basic will look at the material composition of the equipment, where it's made as a location, the net weight of the equipment, and use generic factors to build that out into a number. The TM65 uses every piece of data that goes into the data capture, ranging from where the stainless steel comes from to how many of a certain piece of equipment is made per year from that factory, using their split of energy, whether that's renewable solar, whether it's European electricity from grid. I would surmise that MK and Deisel will get better, to my knowledge. They've just installed an entire solar field on top of their Wolfenbüttel factory, but this gives you a really good idea of how the data can be developed to improve the numbers but become more granular over time. So, as I mentioned, there is a wide-ranging kind of hierarchy of environmental product data. TM65 is not an EPD, an environmental product declaration. It is not a life cycle analysis document. It is the beginning of a journey for manufacturers, somewhere to start that is cost-effective and gets highly developed data sets at mid-level for manufacturers and consultants to start specifying truly sustainable kitchens and start addressing the carbon impact of their equipment. The TM65, to purchase the document, I believe it's around £120 from SIBSI, and there is a full training course, which is about £500. You can work with independent experts like myself or LBC, who will independently calculate that data for manufacturers. The benefit to that is that it's not manipulated because the TM65 is not perfect and you can move those numbers up and down. And if you were to, for example, roll in the wiring boards with the electrical looms, you'd be looking at 36% lower emissions. The data is pretty difficult to get, so we tend to say 6 to 12 weeks on average. The next phase is the life cycle analysis, which is always done by specialists. It's not something that can be done in-house. They are doing them to varying ISO standards and GHG protocols, and they have a very high cost per product. And you can't just say, we want to do the one dishwasher from our range and it cover everything. It is per product, but it is highly, highly detailed and takes around a year to develop. They are then accredited by peer reviews with a limited number of accredited specialists around the planet, to be honest, who will go through that data with a fine-tooth comb, do the credibility checks and the data checks. With the environmental product declaration, which is the end goal for all manufacturers of any equipment. So you can see there are some manufacturers such as Siemens. I believe Nordisk, they're now called, not Granule Disc, I apologise, actually have done LCAs and EPDs for their products. They are highly detailed pieces of documentation that last 3 years, and they are available via specialist consultants and cost rarely between £10,000 but up to £50,000 per product and take about 18 months to actually develop. To touch on why the TM65 is being demanded from construction companies, hospitals and other venues across the UK, it is a comparable standard. It doesn't use varying ISO standards or varying GHG protocols. Every piece of data that goes in there, whether it's a combi oven, a plancher, a fryer, a boiling kettle, is measured along the same linear scale. So you can group 20 combi ovens together from different manufacturers and measure them across the same scale. Environmental product declarations and life cycle analyses are very, very complicated. And I, hand on heart, it's taken me 2 years to get to a point where I understand them. So it must be very, very complicated for an end user. I'm here today just to explain what the need is and why it's being pushed, not to bring you to the light or to say this is something you must do. Every manufacturer is on a journey, every consultant is on a journey, and so is every kitchen house. This is about data availability and serving the end users, because without them, we don't have an industry. And for their reporting, which Sascha will touch on, this is the data that's viable. Really quickly, just touching on what Impact Loop does. We're a tech platform surrounded by specialists from energy sustainability, commercial catering equipment, which is myself, for the industry SINs. And we're here to create traceable PCFs and exportable TM65s to provide to end users that are viable, transparent, and also provide data files that are live and updated for manufacturers to keep the costs down, because we understand it's a stressed industry at the moment, but give everybody a step on the journey that is comparable, viewable, and be a helping hand. So thank you for your time. I'll obviously there's questions at the end, but it's been great to have the opportunity to speak to you all, and I hope that sets the scene for Sascha, and that you've maybe learned a little bit around the TM65 and why mainly me is hassling you for it on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren. But there's a question, so maybe it's good to answer that. Danny in Vito, you saw the question in the chat? So maybe it's good. Danny, where is he? Maybe you can.
Oh, okay. Lauren, how does this work for bespoke items such as fabrications? How do we do this efficiently? What are you finding as feedback from the wider built environment on bespoke items? Not like you, Daniel, to come at me with a highly complex question. Just for the room, Daniel is someone that I get asked questions from frequently. He's quite heavily involved in sustainability. In terms of bespoke fabrications, it is very, very complicated because they are all bespoke in their own right. So what it looks like at stage 2 to what it looks like at stage 5 is very, very different. We, Impact Loop, have built a calculation which is at a millimeter rate or a kilo rate based on the specific type of stainless steel that's being used, whether it's recycled or nickel pig iron, if it's 340, 430, that can be extrapolated outwards. That is not based on a TM65 standard. Sadly, for the metals manufacturers, they get an email from me harassing them for their EPD data, as most of them do have it. You do have to push for them. However, we build a model based on whatever that is, if it's a sheet, if it's a tube, if it's 1.3 millimeters thick, to what that would look like. I would recommend, personally, and I am not the be all and end all or the leading mind in this field, that basing it on the total kilogram weight of metal fabrications is the best way to do it and the easiest step on the journey. However, long term, the most credible way would be for each fabrications company to get an EPD for each process. However, that would be one process for a stainless steel shelf. It would be one process for a hot cupboard, one process for a sink. So you're probably looking at £500,000 worth of cost by the time you've finished. However, we can use an extrapolation standard as a starting point. What are you finding as feedback from the wider built environment on bespoke items? I think the most stark feedback that I've heard, I had a meeting with a quantity surveyor, one of the leading quantity surveyors. They're fairly renowned. They'd just done a piece of research with British Land, and there was a kitchen that came out that was commercial, and because they were told the data wasn't available, they actually guessed using stainless steel factors, which is pretty horrifying as an industry that we're leaving British Land and quantity surveyors in that situation. In terms of more complex bespoke items, so for example, an MKN master line or a bespoke cold room, what you can do is look at them as component levels, build them out and kind of fix them together into, I'm not sure if you have Build-A-Bear in Europe, that might be UK specific. I can see Mick laughing going, God, Lauren's done it again. Or almost a Lego system where you can take the components and clip them all together to come up with an overall footprint. However, it wouldn't be perfect. It would be a highly developed estimate. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Potter.
So let's then start now with the EU, and then if that was not sufficient answer, I think it was. Then we can just write it in here in the chat that everybody can see that. And thank you, Ian. He said how to deactivate the ding dong. It's not. We will see that. So, Sascha, so now.
Okay, good morning from my side. Let me explain what I am doing. I'm Sascha Deisel. I'm working for HKI since 1.5 years. HKI, the Industry Association for House Heating and Kitchen Technology, represents about 240 manufacturers of catering equipment as well as of domestic heating and cooking appliances. We have our headquarters in Frankfurt and we have an office in Berlin and in Brussels. So I do the Brussels job. What I'm doing here in Brussels, I represent the interests of our Mitglieders, of our members. So it's lobbyism. I maintain the contacts to our partner associations here in Brussels and monitor EU legislation and give our members information about EU legislations like the new Eco-Design Framework Directive regulation, the ESPR. So let me give a short introduction on eco-design. Eco-design in the European Union was first introduced in 2005. In 2005, the first eco-design directive only covered products that consume energy themselves. But only 4 years later, 2009, the second eco-design directive extended eco-design to all energy-related products. So products which are not consume energy themselves, but have an impact on energy consumption, such, for example, insulation materials were covered by eco-design since 2009. And this year, we saw the next expansion of eco-design with the ESPR, which is indeed one of the most important components of the Green Deal and will certainly shape the EU's environmental and energy policy for well over a decade from now on. And I usually speak of a double expansion of eco-design. On the one hand, more products are covered, namely almost all of them. There are a few exceptions, so food and pharmaceuticals are not included in eco-design, but almost every product group is covered by the ESPR. And on the other hand, the aim is no longer just to reduce energy consumption, but to create the basis for moving from a throwaway economy to a circular economy. At the same time, the new eco-design is extended to create the basis for ensuring that every consumer has the information they need to make sustainable consumption choices. And as you know, the ESPR is a regulation, not a directive as the previous eco-design directive. It therefore applies directly and does not have to be transposed into national law. This is important because it contains some new tools that did not exist in the previous eco-design directive. So you can see it on the next slide. So these are new tools under the ESPR. There will be a mandatory green public procurement. The ESPR will enable mandatory green public procurement criteria to be set for contracting authorities or contracting entities. And the destruction of unsold consumer goods is prohibited from now on. So I think in our industry, it's not so relevant as catering equipment is not a consumer product, but it is banned. Sorry, not from now on, but the next point is market surveillance and consumer customs controls. So there's a strong focus on controls of regulated products, including planned market surveillance activities, support to common projects and investments. So also the ESPR is a regulation in many aspects. It will work in a similar way than the old eco-design directive. That is, it sets out a framework for how eco-design legislation will work in the EU, but the individual provisions for the product groups will be enforced in separate delegated acts over the coming years. There will be a multi-annual working plan to determine which product groups or horizontal measures will be addressed and then the EU Commission will implement the relevant measures through delegated acts. And an important point is that there will be legal acts for both. On the one hand, those for specific product groups, where it is defined which products fall into this group, and then there are provisions for all these products groups, for example, for commercial dishwashers. And on the other hand, there will be horizontal measures. Here, that means certain characteristics that every or almost every product has, and for which there will be then also a legal act to improve the respective characteristics. So I have a list about the product aspects for which there will be horizontal measures in the future, not now. So you can see it here: durability, reliability, reusability, upgradability, repairability, the possibility of maintenance and refurbishment, the presence of substances of concern, energy use and energy efficiency, water use and water efficiency, resource use and resource efficiency, recycled content, the possibility of remanufacturing, the possibility of recycling, of recovery of materials, environmental impacts, and the expected generation of waste materials. So I've explained the basics so far, and then let's move to the timetable. The first draft of the ESPR was published in early 2022, as a first draft from the Commission. And 2 years until adoption is a normal timetable in the legislation of the European level, I think. At the end of 2023, 1 year ago, an agreement was reached with the Commission in the so-called trilogue procedure between the co-legislators, e.g. the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers. And after the voting in both in the Council and the Parliament, the ESPR came into force this year in July, at the 18th of July 2024. And what we have now is the call for application for the Eco-Design Forum, which lasted until yesterday. And the first ESPR working plan is to be expected in March. So the first delegated act for the product groups and horizontal measures will be expected in late 2025. And the first digital product passport, which is the result of the ESPR, will be first expected in 2027, but there are a lot of question marks about how it will work. So let's have a look at the previous Eco-Design Energy Labeling Working Plan from 2025 to 2024. You have a list of products, and the green, yellow, and orange product groups were covered by the old plan, or as though they are covered or are still in progress. For the wet ones, it was decided that they will be regulated under the ESPR. So you will have, for example, household dishwashers, refrigerating appliances with sales function, professional laundry, professional dishwashers, and others, which will be expected to be covered by the next Eco-Design Working Plan. So how long will it last in the regulation? After the working program, the Commission starts with working on the products. There will be preparatory studies and impact assessments. Yes, so you see here the timeline of the regulatory process. Starting with the working program, then you have the working on the products, preparatory studies and impact assessments on the product groups or horizontal measures. And then there will be the Eco-Design Forum as the successor of the old consultation forum, in which the stakeholders participate, associations like us, NGOs, etc., academia, representatives of national authorities. And then the European Commission adopts a delegated act. And after the delegated act comes into force, there are about 18 months to for the manufacturers to to adapt their products, and then they are enforced to use the new rules for their products. Are there any questions in the chat, for example?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so I can go on with the next slide. So the new eco-design form, I already mentioned it, will be this, as I said, the successor to the previous consultation forum, and it will consist of about 250 people covering a broad spectrum, representatives of national authorities, of NGOs, of associations, of scientists. And the first application deadline expired yesterday. And as someone who sent in an application for myself, for our association, for us as the HKAI, I have to say that it was extremely confusing. So I have no idea how the Commission intends to select the 2,050 participants and what criteria are decisive for this. I don't know. The exact organization of the forum also seems like a black box for me. And it seems as the Commission wants to make it as difficult as possible for the stakeholders to participate in the eco-design forum. But that's my point of view.
That's your personal view on that, yeah?
So that we will see in the next years how it will work. The old consultation forum and the eco-design forum will coexist until 2030. That's because some legal acts are also can amended under the old eco-design directive until 2030. So we have to look how it will work. So, and that's the most important thing. Product groups which are regulated under the old eco-design directive will be covered under the old directive. So, and the first working plan under the ESPR, I already mentioned it, is to be expected in March at the latest April, as it has to be published 9 months after the entry into force. And in November 2024, a few weeks ago, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission published its final study on the new potential product priorities for the working plan. You have the link here. I will send the presentation to you after the meeting. So what we have in the new working plan are 11 final products: textiles, footwear, furniture, tires, mattresses, detergents, paints, varnishes, lubricants, cosmetics, toys, fishing gears, absorbent hygiene products. And there will be 7 intermediate products: iron and steel, commodity chemicals, non-ferrous, non-aluminium metal products, aluminium, plastic and polymers, pulp, paper, and glass, and 3 horizontal requirements: durability, recyclability, and recycled content. But that is just the final study. That's not it. That's not the final working plan, but it can be a prognosis about what will be expected in the working plan. So from my side, this was my presentation. You have my contact details here. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I can start with a question. So,
okay,
if I'm producing, let's say, dishwashers, right?
Yeah.
So we all know that we have to collect data. We have to go that the whole life cycle. We have to make sure that everything is repaired. Blah, 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 blah. So, but if you are a manufacturer, and you do all this assessment and you do all this work, how do you, let's say, use that? I know from MKN, for instance, they just saying, we have green stainless steel. So and everybody's happy, green stainless steel, saying, okay, that's a good product. But you do all the other things. That's the stainless steel, it's the electronics, it's the cabling, it's everything. So is there a label or something so that comes up? So you just do the work and then, you know, send it to the European Union. So that's for me. So I don't understand how the whole thing works.
So you mean market surveillance, or?
Yeah. No, yeah. So, you know, I'm a consultant. So, you know, I say, you know, you have to follow that rule, that rule, that rule. It needs to be sustainable. So, and then, you know, to compare products, I need to have, you know, I would say a simple checklist. You know, it's fulfilled, is right, is right, is right, is right. So who gives me that list where I can compare equipment, saying, you know, this is CO2 1 and this is CO2 100. So I take the one and not the 100, and I need to compare that with prices and everything. So at the end, yeah. So how can I do that? So, you know, until I cannot see that for me now. Yeah. So maybe it's also a question for Lauren. I don't know. Yeah. So, yeah, how can I use the information you gave us? A good question. Oh,
Yes. That's a really good question, yes.
or you can stop sharing.
Do you want me to answer that, Sasha?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
That's
yes.
something that
If you
I deal
want.
with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So essentially, over the next few years, manufacturers under the ESPR will need to have the data available, and under the carbon reporting, every oven, every fryer that a manufacturer sells, the carbon footprint of that single unit will need to be reported as a Scope 3 sold product emission. So the data should become readily available at quite high speed. The way that the hierarchy of TM65, LCA, EPD works, this will also answer Mick's question. They are all the same baseline data sets. There is just more data added onto each one to get more and more in depth. So as a consultant, you should be able to benchmark equipment along the same line, which says, this is the carbon footprint of 4 different combination ovens, and this is the data level. What we are seeing is that obviously the ESPR and eco-design will also look at the policies of the manufacturers. Is it responsibly sourced? Manufacturers can't make any claims under greenwashing laws, which are worldwide, without having the evidence to back it up. So if a manufacturer says, yes, our dishwasher or fridge is made from 90% recycled stainless steel, they should be able to prove that. So you used MKN as an example. The way that they actually validate that is, if once the product is delivered to site and it's green steel, there is an entire validation form where it goes back to the internal sales managers. It gets completed to validate that it is a green steel product and can be declared. But what you should also see is, as manufacturers wrap their arms around carbon reduction and addressing eco-design, recycled content, etc., is that the carbon footprint should go down year on year. And that would be available in their sustainability reports, but also as a consultant, you know, they should be saying to you, you know, you specified 300 of our fridges last year, here was the carbon footprint, and 300 of the same fridges 2 years later, the carbon footprint is now that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the data is readily available and it'll be quick. We're probably 3 years away from that. But the way that the regulation is shaped around digital product passports is that the carbon number will be in there to whichever standard they are going to use. So it's a big learning curve for the industry to start being able to read carbon data. But I think the goal, and I'm not sure if Sascha would agree, is that data is so widely available and kind of in the same interpretable fashion that you would be able to almost sit together 7 different single door fridges and be able to tell not just the carbon impact of it, but the actual whole life carbon impact. There's construction companies, hospitals, prisons, even hotels now are looking at the whole life piece. If a building has a 50-year life cycle, if I say buy this piece of equipment, how many times will I replace that? What is the carbon footprint and the CapEx cost? If I buy, I don't know, something off the shelf and cheap and Chinese, yes, it has a high carbon footprint, but it's cheap. And how many times will I replace that as a whole life over the building? So as the data develops and as manufacturers become more au fait with sustainability in the subjects and the reporting, it should become genuinely quite simple for you to make those decisions and know that the data is available.
Yeah. So, but on top of that, the client needs to has an advantage if he's exactly doing that. The European Union can regulate that. They can, for instance, all public buildings, hospitals, everything that's public money, they have to have that as, I don't know, priority. But if I'm building a hotel in Africa, somewhere in Congo, so then there's a fund maybe from Norway, from the European Union saying, you do that. But at the end of the day, the owner said, please. Yeah. So and if you don't have that on the other side of the construction companies or operators of kitchens have an advantage to use that, it's very difficult. Yeah. So maybe there's a norm for that. Just yeah. So and there's no expert. Yeah. So no expert. But Detlef Rang from Rational wanted to say something.
Yes, Frank, I simply would like to answer your question because this is a question every consultant has. I think the contribution what Sascha showed us is basically something all the manufacturers have to obey. This is very important and it was very detailed, and I would like to say thank you. For your specific question, it does not help. You need a value for each product, which shows, for example, the product carbon footprint for cradle to gate or for cradle to grave. This is 2 stages. And in parallel, there's also the TM65. So, and I'm sure that sooner or later, all manufacturers will show this value on their data sheets and on their documentation. And also we created in the HKI BIM steering committee, we created the 2 parameters. One parameter is CO2 emissions, cradle to gate. And the second parameter is showing how did you calculate this value? Was it TM65 or was it a greenhouse gas protocol? Was it another regulation? So this is the starting point, delivering exactly this data for you. Just as a background, we have in parallel also the new CSRD reporting regulation for the European community, and mainly all the manufacturers are now really on the way to show and to publish their company carbon footprints. And once you did that work, this is a huge work. And once you did that work, I would say you have around 80% of the way to calculate also product carbon footprints. So for me, it's obvious that in the next 2 years, you will get these values from all manufacturers, and there will be some standards establishing. One is already established in the UK and in the influence area of the United Kingdom. So Lauren, you are much, much faster than all the others. And I like this approach because it's very simple, it's clear, and it covers the majority, which is important to show the values. The Europeans try to make it better and more detailed and more time consuming, and that's why we are slower. But the first way will be done from the 1st of January. Then there is the law is in place. So every company has to publish the company carbon footprint. And I guess it's a question of time, Frank, when the others will follow for the product carbon footprint.
No, I understand that, but we do many projects all over the world. Yeah. So everybody here. Yeah. So, and if you do these projects and you have to check first, is it an area where these norms apply? Yeah. So of course we want that. Yeah. So we had in the past, many certificates, LEED and LEED Gold and green building and super green building and dark green building and all these stupid standards. So, and for me, alors, if there is a standard now, so you can really follow, so that's a proven standard. But there is no certificate for that, or is there a certificate? Who is saying you have done your work right?
Okay, so essentially every sector, shall we say, has its own standards. So in hotels, you've got green tag, you have well LEED BREEAM, platinum, and I'm sure if Ed Bircham from Humble Arnold's on the call, he's probably having a small meltdown at hearing that sentence again. And that's in construction, in arena and stadia, there's greener venue, greener arena. every sector is trying to embrace sustainability in their own way, which does all fundamentally fall down to the same things. The legitimacy and the responsibility of the supply chain. Is it ethical? Is it responsible? And are they on a journey with you? When it comes to the actual accreditations, nothing just passes through. And there's companies like AECOM that go through the data with a fine tooth comb. I worked on a project for about 18 months where just for the commercial kitchens, there were 6,800 documents covering single pieces of equipment. So it is 90% about the evidence that backs up, is this a green building? Now, what we will find over probably the next 3 to 5 years if the SPR and DPP comes in is that those things will move and change. We are all learning as an industry. There are standards around food supply chains, like food made good, that doesn't take into account the energy usage of the equipment that made the dish or the actual carbon footprint. In terms of life cycles, I saw a question pop up on that. The biggest problem that I see in the commercial kitchen industry isn't so much the lack of carbon data, it's just the lack of general data. Once it leaves a manufacturer, how long is that piece of equipment lasting? How does it behave in the wild? Because that's what it is. I think we all know that once it gets installed, it depends on the chef's skill level or what the usage is. How does a dishwasher behave in a Costa Coffee to a Hilton to a prison? We have a generic chasm of data that we all need to make the best decisions. Not for just ourselves or the planet, but for our customers, that just doesn't exist. So hopefully, as digital product passports come in and we're able to start building that data hive of, okay, I specified this flight dishwasher and it lasted 20 years and I can prove that. This is a really long journey. I think net zero by 2060 is probably more viable for our industry just because of the sheer lack of data. However,
no, it's just also where you get your information from. So these data are collected from maintenance companies, service companies. You have big ones working all over Europe or so. So they have all these data because they cannot afford that the dishwasher is breaking down 3 times in 10 years.
Yeah.
So, but we have to make these data accessible, right?
Yes, it's a collective movement. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And that's what sustainability is. It's, 2 years ago, it was, good Lord, it's scary. We'll just we'll leave it until it is. And I think now that the pressure is coming down because the large portfolio clients have to do their reporting, the pressure's falling down in quite an avalanche style. But I think if we can come together, not just as a UK or EAME industry, as a global industry, and say, right, we need carbon data, life cycle data, energy data. I don't want to offend manufacturers on the call because I've worked with a lot of you and some of you are my friends, but they all do energy testing and it's in a clean room lab being open and closed. It's not real life data. It doesn't reflect how little it's cleaned or how well it's cleaned, how it's serviced. So I think we almost have an obligation as an industry to come together and say, right, this is what we need before the ESPR regulations to say, this is how we think we do it and build forward, which I've got to give the FCSI UK some really big credit because they now have a sustainability committee. They're saying, okay, well, as food service consultants, what can we drive? But you are completely right. At the moment, it's very, very difficult. And hopefully after this call, everyone's got a better idea of the next 3 to 5.
Oh, actually, you left us scared, I would say.
Oh, don't say that.
No. So there's not so many experts. Yeah. So sorry. So I'm the president. So I will come, first time. So if I have a question for my clients, right?
Yes.
I know there's another question here from Mick. Mick, where's Mick? Ah, there. So Mick, can you read your question? So I have the wrong glasses.
Yeah. Basically, I was just asking from, as a manufacturer, how compatible the information that we provide for an ESPR is to a TM65. Is that can we submit one set of data which would then cover both forms, both requirements? or is it going to be two pieces of work?
There's a UK EU thing. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a good thing about FCSI. So we can have a committee that looks on both and gives a guideline for members how to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure Sascha will agree. When you're looking at carbon data, most of the actual raw data sets are very, very similar. It's just how far in depth they go. So TM65 is the mid-level super granular in terms of the TM65, but it's a raw data set. And LCA is basically the same data set, but with more additions. And it's almost an elevator of how granular the data gets. But Sascha is by far the expert on this one of what data would look like rather than me, but hopefully that'll answer the TM65 side.
Yeah. No, it's just as manufacturers, we're getting hit from all directions, from all over the world, for the same information in a different format.
Yeah.
This has all happened very quickly. And as manufacturers, we're struggling to satisfy every region of the world with the information that they want. So can this be brought together a little bit easier?
So Sascha, what do you say? The norm is not, how I call it, respecting the Americas and Asia Pacific and Africa.
That's
So what are they
correct.
doing, right? So it's just
EU legislation.
island.
So they say how you have to deal with it if you are working in the EU countries.
Yeah, but if I heard Lauren, what she was saying, everything made sense. Yeah, so it's a more practical thing, and we have the law and the practical thing. So what I think is not too far away. It's just different language, isn't it?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's a carbon footprint, and carbon footprint is not, if you use a different word, it's nothing different. Yeah, so. No, I'm optimistic that, we still have 2 years. It will be always, 1 year, everybody will ignore it. 1 year, everybody will panic it. And then the last 2 months, everybody will try to fulfill these norms. Yeah. So that's always like that. Right. Yeah. So, actually it's 10 o'clock. So it's a little bit later already. So telephones are ringing now. People are leaving. Thank you very much, both. So, Lauren, so I hope your car got fixed soon, and Sascha, so you survived in Brussels, yeah. So hopefully, if anybody wants to have a presentation, it's office@fcsi.eu. So Dejan will help us. So if anybody has questions, I want to have the contact details from Sascha or from Lauren. It's office@fcsi.eu, right? Dejan will help. So thank you very much. That was very interesting because I was ignoring that too the last years. So now I know what to do for the next year. Yeah, so that's it's good for the planet. So that's the reason why we have to do it anyhow.